Have you ever done this with a stapler? I remember figuring this out when I was like 7 years old, and I think ever since I realized you could do this, I've wanted to do this. This memory came flooding back into my head one day when I found myself in a giant stationery cupboard. I had just started a new job in a really classically corporate environment, which in itself isn't that weird, but it was really jarring for me because for many years leading up to that, I'd been in and out of workshops building stuff for most of my career. The year was 2015, and this was right around the time that consumer virtual reality headsets were just becoming a thing. A close friend of mine who had just bought a HTC Vive brought one to our jam room one night and said, "You've got to try this out." And it wasn't long before we were tooling around in Unity trying to build silly little games and things. At that point, the stapler idea and the fact that coming to work every day felt a little bit like walking into a sitcom or a movie like Office Space.
Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
Became the foundation for this idea of a game that I really wanted to make. I'd be walking to the office and I would kind of look to my side and see this crowd of folks kind of shuffling towards the office. This was a really powerful source of inspiration for me. And then thinking back to this idea of a stapler that you could shoot, it just fed into this idea of what if you could create like a corporate rage quit simulator where you escape the monotony and the bureaucracy of a really drudgy corporate office job, and with all of the coffee puns that you could ever think of, except with some whimsical elements that kept things fresh and unexpected. Like what if you could take a pencil and a rubber band and a tape gun and make a crossbow? Or what if you could jam a fluoro tube into the end of a cheap torch and make like a makeshift lightsaber? And so back in 2016, this friend and I started work on a game which we called A Case of the Mondays. And let's be honest, it didn't get very far. My ambition dwarfed my ability to actually make anything that worked. I didn't know the first thing about game development. I basically kept learning how to use things like Blender and Unity to the point where about 8 years later, I was actually able to go out on my own and start a small virtual reality production studio where I would make simulations and virtual showrooms for companies. And that gave me enough confidence to decide to pick back up on this game idea after nearly a decade, but just in my spare time in the evenings. So that brings us to March 2025, when one weekend my wife took the kids to her sister's, which meant I had a couple of nights to just sit at home and tinker. And I set myself a challenge. If I could implement a half-decent shooting mechanic that felt good in a couple of days, that'd be enough for me to want to keep going. I wanted to be able to pick up a stapler and shoot it. And I wanted to be able to pick up a soda can and shake it and throw it and have it explode. Which is probably a throwback to one of the best gags in The Simpsons ever. Goddamn, I watched a lot of Simpsons as a kid. And so with not much more than a couple of specific ideas and an image in my head of the vibe and the sort of stuff I wanted to include, I got to work. And when I went to bed on that Saturday night, I could pick up the stapler, shoot it, and then throw my soda can grenade. And I tell you what, this idea of sitting down to build something and then just smashing it out and seeing it come to life, it's addictive. I pretty much haven't stopped since then. I'm really lucky that throughout my career, I've been able to make a living doing all sorts of different creative things. Only through game design have I been able to bring all these things together in a way that is just really autonomous and super satisfying. And so yeah, it does get addictive when you think, okay, when I fire the staples, wouldn't it be cool if they kind of stuck into the surface of stuff? And then 20 minutes later, it's working. It's an addictive feedback loop. But here's the dilemma that I now find myself in. I guess I've been trying to keep myself busy by working on all the basic systems that any game kind of needs, and I've got heaps of ideas for fun, creative stuff, gameplay mechanics, and all that sort of gear. But the problem is, I really need a narrative thread to tie everything together. So that's where I need to focus next.
Oh, mate. What have you done?
Sure, I think the flavour and the setting is pretty well defined. But the story is what's going to tie all these ideas together and make the different props and abilities make sense within the context of the world. After all, some of this stuff is going to be pretty wacky. So where to go from here? After staring at the ceiling for a long time trying to think of what this story could be, I think I've come up with a few pretty good ideas that should make for a fun time. At this stage, everything hinges on nanobots and that orange crust that you get on your fingers after eating too many cheese-flavored snacks. And my plan is to make a video about this once I've kind of rounded out these ideas. Now, even though I'm technically a solo dev, I need to give a massive shout out to my friend Shaun, who's been helping me with a little bit of the artwork. He's an artist who I started working with through my professional VR practice, and he's just one of those magic suppliers who just does incredible work and just totally gets it. Our first milestone will be some sort of trailer, even if it's just a series of small vignettes, with the view to eventually create a demo to garner some interest. Like I said, this is a passion project, so we're literally starting from zero. We can only go up from here. So if you're wondering what kind of game is this, I think we're going to cover that in a future video. If VR is your jam and this sounds like a project that you're interested in seeing come to life, you know what to do. Especially over the last couple of weeks, I've spent a lot of time working on this, so there's lots to talk about and it's fun to share. So I hope you stick around. You can follow us here, you can follow us on Instagram and see how this thing comes to life.